Thank you all very much for coming. It's great to see so many of you have made the long, arduous journey up to the 4th floor, past the plants, the terrifyingly large fish down in the pond, for this fascinating discussion on future workplace fit-out, enhancing sustainability and productivity. My name's Dan Gestico. I'm a director at Savills, and I lead the Savills Earth Sustainable Design team, which is focused on providing sustainable, low and zero carbon design solutions for new and existing buildings. Just a bit of housekeeping. As you're probably aware, you can submit questions using the Slido app with the LREF 23 tag, or we can take questions using a sort of traditional solutions at the end of the session. So however you feel comfortable submitting your questions and your feedback, whether you want to do it as you go or at the end, do whatever suits you. So just to give us a bit of background and a bit of context, about 6 years ago, I had to give a presentation using this new bit of software called Zoom. It was a bit of a novel experience for which I needed to book out a meeting room. I had to get IT involved to get the microphone and the camera synced up, and it took about 2 hours. And to be honest, hopefully that's a familiar example of a workplace and an employee that wasn't really ready for the digital revolution. Back then, God, I sound like a dinosaur. Back then, in-person meetings were the norm, and this often involved taking a lot of time out of the office for travel. It's not exactly a productive use of time. Fast forward a couple of years, and our society, as you know, was plunged into COVID. No more in-person meetings, no more travelling, no more offices. We worked from home for what seemed like an age. Everything was online, and despite this increased level of digital interaction, I don't know about you, but I sort of struggled to maintain those personal relationships with clients and colleagues just through a 2D screen. And now it's 2023. COVID is no longer the spectre of doom it once was, and we're now mixing and matching the best of both worlds. Lots of online meetings, which aid productivity and reduces the need to travel, is a good thing, but with the opportunity to come back into the office and build those essential relationships. Our workplace culture has changed, and I'm pretty sure it's not changing back. Whilst our working practices have changed, sustainability has continued its rise up the agenda. In the 18 years I've been working in the field, what was once a niche subject is now rightly front and centre for all new construction projects. The energy consumed by our buildings in operation is under scrutiny like never before. And here's building on from this morning's topic of building statistics into your intros. Did you know that each unused desk in an office results in approximately 1 tonne of unnecessary carbon dioxide emissions every year? Now this means we have to be smarter about how we service our new hybrid working environments. And it's not just operational energy, we're also questioning the amount of carbon embedded in our products and supply chains. Hopefully everyone's now familiar with the concept of the circular economy, and we realise that when we throw things away, we don't really appreciate that there is no such place as away. The things we throw away still have to exist somewhere. And this is as true for our material possessions as it is for our buildings and workplaces. And I've seen plenty of examples of fit-out furniture, services, materials being discarded, not because they've reached the end of their useful lives, but because they no longer fit the requirements of their occupier. So I've outlined here 2 potentially competing needs, which I hope our panel is going to help us pick apart. Firstly, is the need to provide modern, up-to-date working environments that are inviting to employees and result in inspiring and productive workplaces. And secondly, the need to reduce the turnover and waste of materials and ensure that the energy needed to construct and run our buildings is minimised. So how do we make sure that fit-outs and refurbishments don't follow the environmentally disastrous fast fashion examples that now permeate the high street clothing industry? And here's our challenge for the panel. And I'm delighted to welcome them to the stage. We've got Maliha Hock, who's an associate with LOM Architecture and Design. Richard Hollis, who's an associate director at ACOM. Andy Lance, co-CEO of the Rios Design Collective. And Dan Rafferty, who's an ESG manager at Stanhope. So, Maliha, I'm going to start with you.
Hello.
Hello. First question. So, how do we manage the conflicting ambitions of keeping workplaces up to date with changing practices whilst ensuring the longevity of materials and furniture?
Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for everyone joining this discussion and hello to the panels. So just a bit of context of my background. So I'm an architect at an architect's practice and specialising in commercial interiors. And we work with a lot of occupiers and end users. And we know what occupiers want and we appreciate what they may not know. So we're already sort of seeing and experiencing in our ongoing projects, working on day 2 works before even day 1 work has actually been occupied. So we're already sort of facing those challenges. But in my experience, the quality of experience and the flexibility is absolutely key within the design process. As we're still in a time of uncertainty, we're constantly redesigning to adapt, to respond to clients' changing needs. So starting to look at, for example, the fabric of the building needs to be easily adaptable, robust, and high quality. So that majorly impacts building services, so heating and cooling, technology, ventilation, acoustic control, lighting. And whether it's a change in the business holistically or seeing changes in the way of working, as well as the building fabric being designed to be adaptable, we also have to think about the types of settings within the space, which impacts our decision making in furniture solutions. So just thinking about furniture, meeting pods, they need to be demountable, interchangeable, as well as having personality and identity to create sort of desirable workspaces. So kind of retaining that sort of flavour, creating that identity is quite key as well. So, we know we're in a world of change, but we're also seeing a lot of our clients being more conscious about how they make changes more sustainably. So some of our projects, we're seeing clients requesting for assessments on the quality of existing furniture, assessing, if it can be repurposed or reused in new environments. We recently worked on a project where we repurposed 1,000 desks into alternative furniture solutions such as flexible tables, whiteboards, screen dividers, and we worked closely with the manufacturer to kind of create those design solutions, and it gives the client a really nice story to share, and then also with the client as well, and the manufacturer also to share, how they went around the project, but also for us it kind of challenged us and sort of flexed our design skills in a different way, which is quite fun. Yeah. So in terms of, also thinking about workspaces being more demanding, we're looking at various types of spaces, social spaces, town halls, different ways of focus work, and thinking about the inclusive design part of it as well. So, providing that variation is really key. And so both the building fabric and spatial settings, they need to be designed for adaptable change in a sustainably conscious way. So just thinking about, what we should be doing, assessing quality, repurposing where we can, also buying quality. Sometimes you get clients who are a bit standoffish about doing that, but, they last longer. And that is good value, and that's key. So I wouldn't say there are conflicting ambitions from the client. I'd suggest there are more challenging ambitions, which means as designers we have to get more creative and work harder in collaborating with our peers in the industry. And I think that's exciting and quite promising to look forward to in the future as well as now.
Brilliant. Thank you. I love the idea of kind of that creative workshop environment where you're looking at basically upcycling old stuff, yeah, and saying, well, actually, this is a solid piece of stuff. What can we use it for?
Absolutely.
And that sounds like quite a fun process.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's really interesting because I think, again, thinking about how the times are changing now, and retaining talent and kind of nurturing that kind of culture of wanting to go back to the office. For clients, they want to kind of have those, creating those identities, and that kind of special tokens are quite important. It's a story to keep sharing between each other. So I think it's something that everyone's really buying into as well.
Excellent, that's great. Richard, we talked about some of the sort of design elements from a sort of architectural perspective, but what about some of the technical solutions to minimise energy consumption, both in terms of the actual fit out, but also the management of the space. And how do these spaces cope with the fluctuating workplace attendances that we're seeing in this sort of post-COVID hybrid working environments?
Well, I think I've been working in the fit-out arena for probably the last 15 years since I've been at AECOM, mainly doing environmental assessment methods, so BREEAM, SCAR ratings. And definitely what I've seen is been a wholesale change in terms of, bringing in the furniture and equipment more from an aesthetic point of view, but now the broadening and the number of people that are involved in the decision making has definitely increased from what I've seen. And I think one of the sort of technical areas that I think there's going to be more linkages is going to be between the net zero ambitions of the organisations and how you actually track those in your fit out projects and how you can attribute those. So we've seen on some of the really sort of larger scale fit outs that they're doing very detailed reviews of the whole life carbon of the materials going in, and actually some of the large buildings in Canary Wharf to fit out all of those items. You think about all the line items you have in a cost plan. It is significant amount of materials that are going in, and actually when we've modelled it, it's the equivalent of almost like a new build in terms of the kilograms of CO2. So it's a considerable amount of embodied carbon that needs to be addressed, and I think the clients in the room need to have the information to be able to make those decisions. So I like to see on the cost plans where you've got the cost of the item, but also the embodied carbon. That's what we've been doing that on several buildings where we've gone into detail looking at the raised floor tiles and compared the calcium sulfate floor tile against a reused one, and there's a 75% difference in terms of the embodied carbon. So it's a no-brainer from that point of view. Whether you've got supply and demand is another thing, but that sort of level of granularity, I think we're going to have to need that going forwards on the fit outs, and hopefully as it becomes a bit more straightforward to calculate these emissions and calculate the embodied carbon, then I think it will be more straightforward for people to make those decisions on the different materials.
Okay.
From
And I mean that point about data and granularity, it seems to be a sort of continuing theme through a lot of the discussions we've had earlier today. How are you finding that the supply chain is geared up towards providing that data? Are they, when you say to a furniture provider or a ceiling tile manufacturer or something like that, what's the embodied carbon of this piece of kit? Do they have that information?
It's definitely picked up. When I used to, ask furniture suppliers, and I had an architect who used to email me 50 times a day on asking about different furniture. Is this compliant? Is this not compliant? I was going, I'm going to take a look. And it just wasn't the information there. But I think from a furniture point of view, it's coming. And I was talking to someone yesterday about, thinking about some commercial kitchens and the equipment in the commercial kitchen, and the, no one's been asking these guys about it, but there's, you go into a commercial kitchen and it's almost like there's a different thing to cook something in different. So there's so much equipment that no one's actually thought about, but actually it's sort of, all comes into in the same carbon budget. So it's definitely picked up, and there's more environmental product declarations where suppliers have got the details of the products, so you can do a comparison against one floor tile against another. So it does make it easier, and obviously if you can reuse as much of the existing fabric as possible. Considering lots of offices are now condensing, and there's lots of space, good quality space, where people are just removing items unnecessarily. Where we had a recent job with the BBC in Bristol where they retain the suspended ceiling, they try to retain all the lighting as much as possible. I mean, it's a pain for the contractor because they have to take it all down and put it nice and neatly and do it without smashing it to pieces. But it saves all that material, or bringing all the extra materials. And if you can quantify that, then you can sort of benchmark against your other projects and say, look, this is how we're faring.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks. So Andy, coming to you now, building on what we've heard from Maliha and Richard, what are some of the innovative strategies you've adopted to maximise space efficiency and energy efficiency whilst promoting their healthier and more productive working environment. Sort of, how do you bring those two things together?
Right, so in a lot of the work that we lead globally in our workplace practice at Rios, our process with working with clients tries to really disrupt trends. So much of work is trend-based consumerism. No dig at furniture manufacturers, but everybody's shopping the same catalogs, they're going to the same international fairs. So the conversation is a very controlled one in the sense that no one's celebrating the diversity or what makes culture unique with every organization and how they're working. So what we're finding and how we juggle a lot of these conversations is in our design process, we're spending time getting to know not only the people who run facilities, but connecting to stakeholders. One really great example of that, we worked with Spotify on their LA content headquarters, and we spent a good 6 months with every one of their parts of the organization, knowing the challenge we had is making someone like Madonna happy if she comes in to record a single, and making sure Taylor Swift doesn't run into Madonna, and making sure everybody who's working there is connecting to what they're working on. In those situations and in how we work with our clients, it's discovering those things so that when you go into solving the problem of it, you're investing in that notion of diversity, you're investing in something that's not about a trend or about a generalization that everybody fits into the same box. And it's about finding ways to invest for more long-term use of how the office can be redefined. It was really easy pre-pandemic with basically saying everybody sits at a desk 9 to 5. I think what's been remarkable from the pandemic is we get to shake that antiquated understanding of what work is. And in that, we have a whole new revolution of being able to talk to clients in a very different way about where smart investment comes into play, and where authenticity in building out places and spaces for people can exist.
Okay, brilliant. And you talked a lot about the investment of your time to getting to know these organisations. Did I hear that right? You're spending 6 months with each team?
Yeah, in the case of Spotify, it was 6 months. That was a really interesting one because Spotify had been in Stockholm, had just moved into New York. They were the new kids on the block in Los Angeles. Los Angeles, if you can't tell from my accent, I'm an Angelino. Stepping into LA in the realm of content, you have the industry, capital I industry, you have the glitter, you have the glam, you have the legacy. To be the new kid in the block, you have to do something really provocative to disrupt it. And their concept there was to say, how do we take the entire recording industry, the entire podcast industry, and really make exemplary everything in one facility in one place. If I was an up-and-coming recording star in LA, I would have to go to 100 different places across the city and somehow not only knock on doors, but show up and impress somebody to get to that deal or to get to that content being produced. So in investing in their content headquarters, it was a really amazing round of research, not only with their stakeholder groups. These are groups, if you guys are Spotify users, Rap Caviar, if you know what Rap Caviar is, their job literally is from 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. They drive around the city of Los Angeles, probably indulge in a few vices, and do nothing but listen to music to basically weekly put out a podcast showing everybody what the best in music is. It's not your typical finance department. It's not your typical HR. It's a very different group of people. So in spending the time with them there, it was a really big deep dive. It was a deep dive in all things recording. It was a deep dive in all of the quintessential places, East-West Studios, Capitol Records, you name it. We sometimes get that luxury with most of our clients to really spend that upfront investment, because I think what we can show them is if you pursue your project with authenticity, you shake the trends and you lean into this to really understand what it means to implement a culture long term, the benefits are really great. And so when we get to walk clients around the projects that we've built, they see it. They see something different from that. So it becomes a really easy service to lean into and sell to people, especially now with everybody really navigating a new frontier of what work can be.
Fantastic,
Yeah.
fantastic. And Dan, if I can come to you, because once these guys have done their magic, it's up to the landlord to facilitate it and keep it all running. So how's the landlord-tenant relationship evolving, and how do you build in genuine collaboration to that operational phase, both with the willing, people, yeah, let's work together, and the more recalcitrant tenants who might just go, you want what now? You know, how do you work with those?
Yeah, and to give some context to my role, so Stanhope probably is best known as a developer. I sit within the asset management division of Stanhope, where we have 4 billion in assets under management, over 6 million square feet in across 10 mandates. So, and that's grown massively in the last few years. And I manage across our properties ESG with a focus on environmental. Prior to that, I was a mechanical services engineer on the design side. And prior to that, I started life as a SCAR assessor. So I feel like I've captured a lot of the phases of fit out and design. So I'll have to decide what hat I wear when I'm answering some of these questions. But I think what we've found in the last few years is that the relationship between landlord and tenant is becoming increasingly more intertwined. And I mean, good development and asset management has always been about understanding occupier needs and providing environments that they can thrive in. And I don't think that's fundamentally changed. But what I think is a real dial mover, especially, and I have a natural bias in this, is the rapid increase in ESG goals set within occupiers. And these goals we're increasingly finding, or they are, based on measurable outcomes. So that's bringing into focus operational energy more than it ever has done before. And so we've seen this with Neighbours UK, we've seen it with science-based targets, with CREM, with net zero carbon commitments. And what this means is that the landlord and tenant are increasingly interdependent on each other for outcomes. And what we do in operations inherently impact each other. And I think this is great. I've been heartened and impressed with the maturity that we've seen in the occupier market for prospective tenants. There's been a massive growth in what we're seeing coming in as a developer and asset manager. Now we have technical due diligence questions around ESG, and nothing made me happier than to see a question from a prospective occupier to say, what are your plans to manage energy post-completion of the building? Yeah. We absolutely welcome those questions, and that's what we think drives collaboration. Which brings me on to the point around collaboration. I think collaboration needs to be intentional. Landlords need to set strategy, need to drive that. It can't be set in a sustainability building forum and hoping that it sorts itself out. It really needs to start with a strategy. And I think fundamental to success of collaboration is that it needs to start from shared ambitions and shared goals. Just having that set in place from the outset just enables all of the good work that follows. And this is so fundamental to us that it's the first clause on our ESG leases. And even where we don't have it in lease and we've gone back to our existing offices and set that in charters or memorandum of understanding, so that we start that relationship with the understanding of this is what we're both driving at. And I mean, picking up on a lot of the themes of today really, transparency, data. I think on the point of data, I found it's not even, when landlord and tenants are sharing data, it's not just about the data that's being shared, but actually it's you're sharing in trust and you're jointly buying into the concept of the intent to improve performance of the building. So it's, although it can be, data sharing is important, it's much wider than that. And then what we've found from practice is genuine collaboration works when you engage at a variety of levels. So we engage on site with facilities teams, with office coordinators. We engage with business leads on a regular basis to make sure that the space is working for them. But also higher level than that with corporate sustainability teams, so that we can feed into or help us to understand what drives them in terms of what are their sustainability ambitions, what do they want to do. And we've actually found that's unlocked a lot of opportunities for us that we wouldn't have already or ordinarily seen if we were just within the site operations. And then to your last point around potentially uncooperative tenants, I genuinely feel that nobody is uncooperative for the sake of it. And I think it's about understanding the barriers to entry. And they could be plentiful, and it's about understanding that for the particular occupier. To give an example, those who aren't large corporates don't perhaps have large central teams that can process the fast-moving landscape of sustainability, and let alone translate that to what that means for their business and then the office spaces that they occupy. So I think it's our job as a landlord to bring them on that journey, to have a compelling narrative, to demystify what we're actually asking for, to help them understand what we're asking for and why, and then support them into achieving that. And that's what we're looking to do throughout the process, from kind of pre-meets, fit-outs, leasing, through to operation and occupation.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Dan. Okay, I'm going to ask a general question now to the panel, so it's a bit of a free-for-all, so whoever wants to pick this one up. The whole point about a productive workplace is having a busy workplace. You know, we kind of come in, we sit next to people, we overhear conversations, we kind of get inspired by other people. But what makes people fundamentally want to leave their house with a nice little home office and their kind of creature comforts around them and come into the office? Get on a tube train, in the rain, in the dark and the cold. Why?
Well, when you sell it that way,
Welcome to London in winter.
oh my God. I can jump into that. You can poke fun at the Angelino and me, but we always talk about this with our clients as vibe, right? Like there's this amazing stat, and I'm going to make eye contact with my colleague Emma. She told me the other day that our field of vision, we see 2 feet around us, but if we close our eyes, our subconscious, like if you were to fill up everything in our heads, it could take up 11 acres of space. So if you start to think about that and what it means to come into some place that's supposed to inspire you, that's supposed to push productivity, that's supposed to push collaboration, you have to make environments that bring energy. Like, the worst thing ever would be to come out of a pandemic and go back to an office. Don't take this personal if this is what you did, but it's don't. And see nothing but desks. I mean, how depressing would that be? Like, the idea of really celebrating the coming together to do everything other than sit at your desk and work. We poke fun at ourselves at our office in LA, where we're all sitting around on Zoom calls in the office and not celebrating the fact that we're together. And so keeping it front of mind and really pushing clients to dream bigger or think different. We do this amazing thing in capturing energy with so many people juggling. I have an abundance of leasable space. I don't have the necessary need. What can I be doing? And so we do this thing that I informally call a 10% challenge. If I talk about it to a client, they'll say no immediately, so you kind of have to nuance it into the conversation. We did an exercise in our office where we used to have a really large all-hand space, and now a couple times a year we set it up for voting. We bring voting machines in, we bring the community in. It changes the entire vibe of the office. People feel better connected, the community feels engaged. We're working with Nike right now on their world headquarters, which traditionally was so defined by work and coming together to work, and we've somehow, pushed them into a realm of saying, how does your world headquarters bring consumers in? How does Nike become a tourist destination for people traveling the world, right? This idea of like disrupting and doing something different to bring new energy into the workplace is like so necessary right now to bring that vibe and bring that sense of doing something different.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, I think just sort of tagging on to that, I think, sort of bringing back people to the office is an organisational challenge. Sorry, excuse me. Organisational challenge. So, there's a lot of kind of how do we, retain talent and kind of bring people together. And I think one of the things post-pandemic is, that lack of connection and community feel, feeling like you're part of something. And so as designers, I think it's definitely our role to kind of almost set the scene, set that stage for them, facilitate those kind of events, opening up kind of spaces for other uses, to bring even connecting with other people outside of the business and kind of creating that community. So it is an organisational challenge. It's a client sort of, they need to kind of host these events. But I think as designers, we need to kind of set that scene for them and try to design spaces that can kind of flexibly do that as well. And that's kind of key. It goes back to my point about spaces being adaptable. I think once you kind of start to design those spaces and host those events, you're bringing back that, that community feel. You feel connected to where you work, and it makes it more desirable to go back day in, day out.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, I think splitting it into the why and the what. The why people want to come back. We've done occupier surveys across a lot of our properties, and we have repeated responses that it's collaboration. I think the pandemic showed us that we can operate at home, but actually we get the most productivity when we're in a room together. That works the best. A lot of our occupiers, especially when you talk to the more senior people in the business, are worried about upskilling of younger staff. And this sounds crazy, but there's if you're Gen Z, you've never operated in a world where a 5-day working week existed. That's completely alien to them. And so on the one side, you have business leaders wanting to bring their staff in, wanting to support them. It's about keeping, upskilling and retaining talent. And then on the other side, you perhaps have people who aren't used to coming into the office. They've enjoyed being at home, perhaps. Not all, that's very broad brush. And we're seeing a lot of these kind of challenges between different generations. And then I think it's about matching the what to the why. And I think other people on the panel were better at answering that than I, but we're definitely seeing it's not necessarily about we've got too much space. It's we used to have 60% desks and 40% other breakout space, and now maybe it's flipped. There's more collaborative space, more types of different working areas so that you can vary your day between different tasks. And then the other important point which we have heard is amenities. Yeah. People want to come to a place and it be an experience rather than just I'm going to the office. And it's about mixing that work with experience.
Brilliant, thanks. And Richard, when people do come in, do they need to feel safe? I mean, we've just been through a traumatic couple of years where people are sort of reluctant to get back on the train. Are there sort of technical solutions to reassure people that they're not going to catch the next wave of COVID or whatever comes down the pipeline?
Well, I think a lot of developers now, in terms of things like fresh air rates, it's gone, incredibly, it's increased incredibly, and there's been more focused on air quality, and making sure we're looking at things like CO2 levels in spaces. And as people, devices get more clever, they're going to have wearables that these Gen Zs are going to be able to work out. The VOC levels are too high. I don't want to sit in this space. There probably will be a shift between the temperature arguments that we usually get from someone's too hot or someone's too cold to other invisible parameters that they're going to be thinking about and having a conscious thought about. So I think it's definitely there's been a big push, and we're seeing in terms of fit out with the building services guys are changing the design and making sure that the intakes are located separately, incorporating sensors into the building so they can change the amount of air filtering into the office space and into the boardrooms where that's where the people are making decisions. But probably the CO2 levels in the boardrooms are the highest of all the spaces. So I think, that is definitely at the forefront of a lot of the developers. And having that, a lot of the spaces now, if you sort of we're doing a development in Gresham Street, and, if you look on Google Maps, most of the other developments have outdoor space. So if you can occupy, if you can utilize that roof space as a place to retreat, in a city, then that's a great space. That can really get, occupants back, building users back into the building.
Fantastic. Yeah, it used to be full of plant, now it's full of plants. Questions from the floor. We could take some via the laptop, via Slido. There's a hand up. Right over there, come on.
Hello panel, my name is Helen Parton, I'm a workplace design journalist. We haven't heard an awful lot in the session about retrofit, which I think probably is the future of workplace fit out in a sustainable manner, right? I want to know what the panel has to say about those ugly buildings, those less than glamorous buildings, those buildings that probably don't have a vibe. I loved hearing about the Spotify story, but I want to sort of hear about the approaches that the panel would take to future workplace fit out for those more traditional clients that probably need a little bit more change management and guiding hand along the way.
First look at each other.
Ugly buildings and change management. Who wants to take what? I love the ugly buildings thing. I think, in the work that we're doing, we're finding more and more attention being put towards conscious decision making on a real estate side with the clients that we're working with. We sometimes get pulled in early with certain clients and we'll evaluate properties. I always go with the ugliest one. It usually has the most charm, it has the most character. The hardest part is that change management thing, because these two do come together in a really interesting way, is being able to be there as a person who can reassure someone how to outline where challenges are. Sometimes those poor ugly buildings have a lot of charm that makes them harder to lay out, harder to be efficient with, and figuring out how to show a client there's ways of celebrating those differences. It's really interesting. I'd say 50% of our clients have really clean Class A standard office buildings, and 50% have really grimy, interesting warehouse spaces that you come in and you have to, figure out how to navigate it. How do I bring a little bit of grime and that into these really nice Class A buildings? How do I work smart in leaning into your decision to get real estate that upfront and conscious, you're going in making a smart decision to bring life into something new. I think that's where having a really good design team sitting with you and doing those is important for clients, because most of them will have a facility team who's making decisions on behalf of the organization and the engagement of all of their employees, but then having someone who can come in and disrupt or at least push boundaries a little becomes beneficial to know how to test the limits and what the challenges and opportunities will be when you step into hopefully an ugly building turned beautiful, I think.
Anyone got anything to add?
So I interpret ugly buildings being sort of the square boxes that are kind of sort of lifeless and lacking character. And I think working with change management, it's kind of trying to cultivate sort of a new identity. So it's thinking about, first of all, with change management, the ways of working. Obviously now with the change of times, people are working very differently, as we've spoken about before. So it's kind of from our experience, we've got big clients like Microsoft and also HSBC, Santander. So we've worked with very ugly buildings in the past, and they are very much square plans. And it's about kind of working with the change management to kind of identify if people are working differently and kind of giving our insight into creating kind of giving an insight into how they could be working and facilitating that as designers. And so again, it's kind of reimagining that workspace for them is quite important. And actually, it's a way from, it's great, it's actually quite fun working in those ugly buildings, because it's a challenge for us to make a new identity to it. So I think we embrace it, really.
Great, thank you.
And I think the the London plan and the GLA is making more developers, you have to refurbish your buildings, you have to retrofit them. You won't be able to knock them down because of the embodied carbon that you have to account for. So there's going to be more of that where we're going to have to work and look at interventions. And already we have in-house tools that look at the sort of the big carbon impacts, and can we retain parts of the facade? Can we retain parts of the structure? But is that facade working as well as it should be, or do we have to change it? So I think in those early stages where you've got the different optioneering, and I've had it in the past where I've had some projects where you thought it was going to be a refurbishment, and then come back from summer and it's they're knocking it down. You go. And I think we'll move away from that in London. I think it will just become the norm that we've seen it with Marks and Spencers where they can't knock down that building. So I think we're going to see more of that.
And is that your kind of approach as well, Dan? Retrofit first, retrofit only?
I think absolutely that's it's the way the market is going. I think to the point those buildings would have once been a new building. And so I think when we think about new buildings, it's about that long life, loose fits. How do we provide a base build that is adaptable, that can be changed, that is flexible, and what do we need to do in the base build in terms of services provision, be that ventilation, heating or cooling, is it zonable? Do we design the facade in a way that's adaptable and can be changed fairly readily? So I think obviously for the buildings that are there, that's one approach. But for the buildings we are constructing at the moment, we have an opportunity now to make sure that they do have a lifespan. And to Richard's point earlier about the embodied carbon of fit outs, I think that's an area that still has a way to go in terms of benchmarks and understanding impacts, where we're a lot further down the road in new builds in understanding benchmarks, and we've got bands and trajectories. What that looks like when you add on, I was interested in Richard's point around adding on fit outs, it could be almost a new build in itself.
Yeah, that was a shocking number.
Yeah, I think it needs to be reviewed in totality, and I think we're getting there.
And just combining a couple of sort of questions that have been submitted via Slido, building on that point around the sort of whole life carbon bit, what are some of the sort of circular solutions that you've seen in terms of kind of where does the stuff go? Is there a big warehouse somewhere full of unused desks and chairs? I mean, you talked about upcycling, Millie, which I thought was a wonderful concept in creative thinking. But practically, how do we find uses for sort of, not waste materials, because it's bad word, materials that are no longer deemed relevant but could be used elsewhere? How do you connect those dots if you haven't got another building that's coincidentally at the same stage and needs those things? What are the sort of circular solutions that either exist or need to exist to kind of facilitate the reuse and upcycling of products and services?
So I think I'm slightly fortunate that we do have clients who do have the facilities to be able to, they've got a number of buildings, and so we're working with them on those number of buildings to know how we can assess the furniture and maybe just put them in different settings, repurposing. The first instance is kind of seeing if we can utilise those desks or furniture in different sort of environments for different purposes. And then again, I think storage facilities is also working with manufacturers as well. So thinking they do have the means to be able to take back furniture. A lot of the sort of bigger companies do sort of offer that. And same with materials like carpet, for example, carpet tiles. We've sort of, I went through a sort of framework sort of exercise with one of our clients, and one of the key things was like, what happens after 10 years with these carpet tiles? Do you have facilities to take it elsewhere? And a lot of people are on board with it, so we are seeing that changing, and it is positive, so hoping more businesses do that.
Great. There's definitely, from the soft strip out point of view, there are businesses out there where they've got it nailed, and the contractors have got it, and pretty much anything that's not fixed, they can repurpose it and give it to charitable places. I think really, and we've seen it in sort of design in terms of actually just removing suspended ceilings, removing those finishes where you don't actually need them.
Yeah.
Can we have exposed services? Can we have exposed, and then that means you won't need these additional extra items that we have to think about at the long term. And trying to remove, some of these composite materials that are really difficult to actually recycle. So some of the projects we've worked with, there's a banned list of products that we say we don't work with these. And on the BBC project we had a local architectural firm where they repurposed pallets, and they created a whole kitchen space. All the furniture was completely repurposed waste material effectively that was locally sourced. So
again, it's those creative solutions that just with a bit of a creative spark, with some lateral thinking, there's actually really nice solutions there, isn't there?
I think there's also ways to connect clients to local economy in a sense of, going back to the notion that most of these furniture items are being shipped globally, right? If I'm ordering a desk from XYZ manufacturer, it's typically going to be on some form of ship and brought by truck to site. So in celebrating local economy, one of the things we learned during the pandemic with construction going on, there were, customs shut down and things not moving, that we had a project where we had to basically redesign the whole thing to source everything within a 30-mile radius of the project. One of the things that we found in that is that connecting a client to a fabricator and not a manufacturer that's local puts a story inherent to the things that they're bringing into their space that connects them so differently to that as an item that it doesn't feel like something you just chuck away when you're done with it, that it has a personality. They've met the makers who are doing it. We're just starting to do a project in Bucharest where we had a conversation yesterday about, do you do millwork or do you order furniture that you ship to site? And it's like, no, do the millwork. You're going to connect to these makers. You're going to foster the local economy. You're going to control where your materials are coming from. You're going to do so many different things than just ordering something off a website or through a dealer and bringing it by boat, by trailer to a job site to be installed. So there's ways to think about that early on about, I don't know, making something feel more special, falling in love with the things that you're bringing into the space and seeing the value inherent in them.
Fantastic.
I think just to build on Richard's point, hearing him talk about stripping out suspended ceilings and lights, I think from a developer perspective, I think we're finding less is more. Definitely the Cat A office, quite often fit outs come in, rip out material, equipment, and it's essentially wasted. And I think that's been there as a way to lease spaces, and it's kind of a symbiotic relationship in that the developer provides it, occupier expects it. I think as we mature and understand embodied carbon spaces, we'll shift more towards shell and core delivery, and also with the use of technology, being able to visualize these spaces in virtual reality to understand what we can get out of them. I think that would be a real key to reducing material wastage and embodied carbon.
I love the idea of a VR fit out. Brilliant idea.
We have done it in some areas to show possibilities and flaws.
Fantastic. Right. The little clock in front of me is rapidly running down, so I'm going to sort of summarise now, if I may. So, I mean, there's so many ideas from you, and I was just thought, how the hell do I summarise this? But if I was really to just kind of pick up on any points that really encompass everything that everyone here has been saying, it's the need for lateral and creative thinking about how we design our spaces to be adaptable, how we kind of gather data to demonstrate the embodied carbon, the circularity, and use that as part of the decision-making process. So you're kind of making decisions, not just on cost, but also on carbon and longevity. Investing the time within the organisation, make sure that the spaces we're working out really fit that organisation and they're going to stand the test of time. And basically bringing occupants with you, that collaboration piece, and thinking creatively about how you engage with them if they are if they're dragging their feet a little bit, you know, that kind of, how do we kind of align our values really to deliver something that we all need? But yeah, I absolutely think it's been an absolutely fascinating discussion, and I'd like you to join me in thanking our panel.